Welcome once again to Reflections and Andrew White. And he's going to do a lot of talking. So I'm going to stand in the background or sit in the background. And we go back to the beginning. Well, St. Thomas is not quite the beginning, Andrew, but very important part of your life in hospital there. You were a medic. And then the Holy Spirit came along and changed, a real U-turn, wasn't it?
Well, in many ways, St. Thomas's was my beginning because it was always my first love. When I was very young, I was very ill and I was treated at St. Thomas's. And I grew up wanting nothing more than to do medicine at St. Thomas's. And everybody thought I was stupid and nobody thought I could ever do it because you've been too ill. You even did your A-levels in St. Thomas's as a patient. I did do it, and on the 13th of September 1981, I started as a student there. And it wasn't just a time which would strengthen me medically. It was also a time of great spiritual renewal. The Christian Union at the time at the hospital was a real live wire place. It was like a lighthouse. And I couldn't quite understand why this Christian Union was so on fire. I thought it might be because there's solid biblical theology, but there was more to it than that. And one Sunday night, I eventually joined all the other students and went to the church which they all went to, which was St. Mark's, Kennington. And St. Mark's, Kennington was quite an interesting church. It was one of the Waterloo churches built to celebrate the Battle of Waterloo. And the original vicar was none other than Montgomery's son. The Montgomery was the original vicar. And this church was passionately alive. But the vicar there and his wife were my greatest mentors in life. And his name was Nicholas Rivet Carnock. And his wife was Marigold. And he had actually started at Holy Trinity Brompton as a curate. He had trained at Cambridge, but not at Ridley, the Sound College. He was at Westcott, which was the Woolly Liberal College. But he had come in contact with the Holy Spirit, and he was set on fire, and the church was set on fire. And I remember going there, and all my fellow students were with me. And it was wonderful to see literally all of the medics from Thomas's and the student nurses, or nightingales as we called them. And we all worshipped together, prayed together, and had a great belief in miracles together. I had grown up as a Pentecostal in the Assemblies of God. So we obviously believed in the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And we used to go to these waiting meetings. And these were the most boring meetings in the world. And we'd go and wait and wait and wait and pray that the Holy Spirit would fill us. At Kennington, when we wanted to be filled with the Holy Spirit, we got seriously zapped. And I remember being zapped by the Holy Spirit and praising God in tongues all the time. And I used to be a bit crazy and healthy then. I used to start swimming in the outdoor swimming pool at Kennington Park at 5 in the morning. Then I'd run to the hospital, and by 7 a.m. I was setting up for my first operation of the day. But when I got filled with the Holy Spirit, it just changed my life forever. Never again was I just concerned about the doctrine. I was concerned about living in the power of the Holy Spirit and about action. We had some incredible, miraculous events, and one of the first ones was with one of our patients. He had very serious bronchial cancer, and we'd opened him up and closed him. It was too bad to do anything. Anyway, Nicholas, the vicar, called him round to the church. He got zapped and healed and totally restored. And that was my first home root leader, somebody who I'd seen on the operating table and seen completely restored. Now, that was so important for me because this did not just set my life up. Nicholas and his dear wife, Marigold, became my mentors in life. And they were with me throughout all my time at St. Thomas's. He was one of the few people who told me I should go into the church. There are people telling me, how can you leave medicine and all that you've done and achieved there and go off and be a theological student? Well, he encouraged me to do it. He even came and visited me at the theological college, and I soon realized that theological college of its own was nothing without the Holy Spirit. And after 4 years of training, I got my first job, which was another St. Mark's, but this time St. Mark's Battersea Rise. And the vicar was Paul Perkin, and he had been a curate at Holy Trinity Brompton. And St. Mark's Battersea was one of the very first plants of HDB. And so I went there, and we got totally inspired by God. And Nicholas continued to be my mentor in life. And the other day, I'm writing a series on the heralds of glory, the people who have really been the backbone of my faith. And many of you will know that I'm very involved in the Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry in Redding, California. And that is a real glory place. But honestly, St. Mark's Kennington was even more dramatic. And that was my first experience, and my first experience of a real servant of God. And he always lived his life as a servant. his vicarage was, every room was full with people who were homeless that they'd found and vagrants that they'd given hope to. And I just thought, this is my kind of man. And last week was the 200th anniversary of the founding of the church, one of the Waterloo churches, to celebrate the Battle of Waterloo. St. John's at the Waterloo in London, St. Mark's, Kennington, and then one in Stoke Newington. And it was wonderful to realize, even now, as I look back on my wonderful life around the world, this man was my mentor. He taught me also to love Israel. At the very heart of renewed faith, he said, was a belief in serving the promised land and believing that God wanted his people to return to the promised land. And so I had this amazing experience. And it was an experience that took me through my St. Mark's Battersea days. It still carried me through into my Coventry Cathedral days and still sustained me when I went back to be a minister in the Middle East. In my work in Jerusalem and Baghdad, and I would go backwards and forwards between the two. And I can remember thinking once, why am I ending up in Baghdad when all of my background and training was Jerusalem? But that was what I wanted. That was my understanding of theology. God wanted me in Babylon because that's where I would really see his glory. And I saw more miracles in the real Babylon than I ever saw in the real Jerusalem. And that kind of made sense because it was when the people of Israel were exiled to Babylon that they saw the incredible miracles. And every day we saw angels and miracles. And my favorite place to go to was the shrine of Ezekiel, where Yehezkel the prophet was buried. And that was all part of the supernatural ministry that was prepared for me by God through Nicholas and Marigold Rivet Carnock. And it was the greatest thing in the world to be reared by two people like that. Any questions, Rodney?
No, there you go. I'm fascinated. Well, I know one thing, that you had your eyes on the resuscitation trolley, let's call it, in St. Thomas's, and you thought, oh, I'll never get that job.
I know. I always said that I wanted to run the crash team, the cardiac arrest team, by the age of 30. And in the natural, there was no chance of that. But on one period, I had been away to the Colin Urquhart Harvest Festival with all of St. Mark's. And I returned to the hospital to do a locum. And I found out that my locum job was working on the cardiac arrest team. The man who was in charge of it got a bit dodgy, and in the on-call room, he started keeping his pet rats. So they threw him out, and who should get the job at 27 but me? So I did. And that was all part of the whole mystery of this magnificent Pentecostal fire experience through my Nicholas and Marigold River Carnock, who were my great mentors in life.
How many people did you resurrect, Andrew?
I don't know, but I've much more enjoyed resurrecting people since I left the hospital. In Baghdad, we did lots of real resurrections of people from literally their deathbed, praying for them. I remember one girl, she had cystic fibrosis. She was a Muslim girl. Her father came to see us, and we had a clinic at the church as well. And he said, I want you in the English clinic to make my daughter better. And I said, we're only a small GP surgery. Your daughter is in the university hospital. We will pray for her. And I want you to go to her, put your hands on her, and just say, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And so he went back to the hospital. When he got there, his daughter had actually died. And he called me and said, Abuna, you said my daughter would live. I said, she will. Put your hand on her and say, Yeshua, Yeshua, Yeshua. And he did that. And she suddenly sat up. And the first thing she said was, Daddy, I'm hungry. Can I have some food? So I said, that's good. It's happened before. It's in the Bible with Jairus' daughter. So that was a real experience of resurrections.
Sometimes it's difficult, isn't it, Andrew, because we have our own thoughts of where we like to live and what we like to do with our lives, and yet God has other plans, and it's maybe a bit difficult to say, okay, have your way, God, I will go, but you're a bit reluctant, aren't you?
Absolutely. And you were reluctant when you first ended up where you are now.
Indeed.
But it was
Yes.
where God wanted you.
Yeah.
Because from there, he could send you around the world. And I was reluctant when I left Baghdad and came back to Lippulk in Hampshire, which I used to call the most boring town in the world. And yet from here, I can do things all over the world, even through Zoom and Skype.
Well, we're on Skype at the moment. We've been having problems with the dear old Zoom, haven't we? But we hope next week to solve that.
We hope to get a MacBook expert in to try and sort out our Zoom.
There we go. And we'll leave the viewer with that exciting thought, because they'll be able to see us in real full screen. Until next time, Andrew, bless you and thank you.
Blessings and thanks, dear Rodney.